On July 22, 2026, a House subcommittee held a hearing on conditions at the Delaney Hall Immigration Detention Center in New Jersey. Republicans called the abuse reports false. Democrats called them real.
Mr. Michalski, is it easier to pick up a criminal on the street or at the detention center?
Congressman, thank you for the question. It's always safer facility to facility.
Yeah, it is, but that's what sanctuary jurisdiction's all about. You got a detainer notice. Federal government, federal law enforcement knows that the migrant in the detention center, the local detention center, entered the country illegally, but has been alleged to commit some other crime, but there's a detainer notice. Hold that guy, let us come get him there instead of out on the street, right?
Yes, Congressman.
Yeah, and I mean, in just simple terms, I used the term earlier, but I don't know what anyone better. This is like really just, do you think it's a dumb policy, sanctuary jurisdiction? Do you think it's just a dumb policy that these local jurisdictions have?
I think it's absurd.
Mr. Del Cueto?
I believe it creates a magnet for criminal behavior in our country.
Yeah, Mr. Arthur, what do you think? Think it's a bad idea?
It's a horrible idea. And when I started in immigration in the mid-90s, there were maybe a handful of sanctuary jurisdictions, but every cop wanted, every police department wanted to hand criminals over to the INS to get them off of the streets.
Do sanctuary jurisdictions create tension between federal, state, and local law enforcement?
Without a doubt.
Yeah, Mr. Del Cueto?
Absolutely, it does.
Mr. Michalski?
Absolutely. Just look at New Jersey. Is a great example of that.
Yeah, and that doesn't help. All of this doesn't help, and I think some of you already talked about the safety concerns for law enforcement, for the public, and frankly, for the migrant, right? Jeopardizing the safety of everyone when you have these policies in place. You all agree with that? Yeah.
Yes, Congressman.
And yet we have, again, we did the research, almost a third of the country, 31.5% of the country, because you got 18 big blue cities, 11 big blue states. You have this thing, and we've actually seen it play out. Denver, Colorado, illegal migrant who had committed another crime in the detention center. The notice gets sent to the detention center. Will you hold this migrant until we get there? They stamp on the form, no, we're going to release him to the streets. An ICE agent was hurt while apprehending this individual on the street. Again, just ridiculous, didn't need to happen. So again, we're going to keep talking about this. Oh, and the real concern too is that the ICE agent was hurt there, but the situations where it could have been prevented, the person is released to the streets, and then they go harm, in some cases kill, American citizens. And frankly, if that happens over in Fairfax County, Mr. Descano will take into account the person's immigration status. It's right in his policy when deciding what to charge that individual with. Just adding insult to injury, adding dumbness on top of dumbness. I mean, it's just like, that is crazy. So this is something that just has to change in the country. We talk about having safer streets and everything else for the public. This is just, it's just so wrong. And I think it's all part of the left's plan. Let in 10 million, as I said earlier, create sanctuary jurisdictions, don't fund people like Mr. Michalski, ICE agents who go out there and enforce the law, and then have prosecutors who do their ridiculous charging and plea bargain decisions and create this unsafe environment. That is what the left wants today, and that's what they're carrying out. And again, it makes absolutely no sense. So I want to thank the chairman for his good work on overseeing this and calling attention to what's going on at Delaney Center, where the left has said all these terrible things are happening, but he's visited there and just hasn't.
We should take violent attacks on the police extremely seriously and reject it in every circumstance. Mr. Michalski, you've spoken passionately against violent assault on the police. Do you think it's a good idea to pardon felons convicted of violently assaulting police officers without looking at their individual criminal record or the threat that they may still pose to society?
I'm sorry, Congressman. Can you just repeat the question?
Do you think it's a good idea to pardon convicted felons who were convicted of violently assaulting police officers without consulting either their prior criminal history or the chances that they will reoffend?
Sir, that's up to the courts. I don't.
Do you have no position on that?
No,
How about
no
you,
position.
Mr. Del Cueto? Do you think that's a good idea?
That would be up to the court, sir, and it would be possibly a case-by-case basis.
Okay, Mr. Arthur, what do you think about that?
Because it's a pardon, it's not actually up to the courts. It would be up to the executive and the state. Normally, I would argue against that, but I also think I know where your question's going. So, yes, I would oppose it.
All right, Mr. Senator, what do you think about pardoning violent offenders who attack the police, brutalizing them in many cases, without consulting their prior criminal history or the chances that they'll reoffend?
I think there has to be a thorough review of the facts of a certain person's
Individualized review or just in general? Like
individualized review. You know, I agree with clemency as a tool, and executives should use clemency frequently, but there has to be a review.
The chairman said, violence against law enforcement is wrong, I'm sick of it, and we can't tolerate it. And I agree with that, but President Trump pardoned more than 1,500 people, hundreds of whom had violently assaulted our police officers, brutalizing them, injuring them, giving them traumatic brain injuries, concussions, heart attacks, strokes, without looking at a single one's individualized records, just pardoning them, all of them, en masse. And guess what? 97 of them have already gone on to reoffend today. They've been convicted of, so far, child sexual assault, home invasion, production of child pornography, conspiracy to murder an FBI agent, kidnapping, reckless homicide, domestic violence by strangulation, stalking, drug trafficking, burglary, and a lot more. I don't have time to get into all of them. One guy, Andrew Paul Johnson, this guy was still in prison. Trump pardoned him, gave him clemency. He got out of prison and a few weeks later went and sexually assaulted a 12-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl, and then tried to stop them from reporting him by saying he would give them some of the money that he gets from Donald Trump because he's J6 and they're all going to get millions of dollars. So just to give you a sense of what's going on out there. So for those people who are categorically denouncing violence against the police, I'd like you guys to take that to heart and talk to some of the Capitol officers who are protecting us here today. You'll see them on your way out. Well, look, Lorenzo Salgado Araujo was a 52-year-old construction worker and immigrant who lived in Houston for 35 years. He had no criminal record, no charges, no arrests. On July 7th, he left home to pick up his brother and two co-workers to go work at a construction site of an American business. ICE agents in two unmarked cars looking for someone else saw him, and without turning on any lights or without any indication of who they were, began chasing his van. So they surrounded his vehicle and attempted to force him off the road. Moments later, an ICE agent who was not wearing a body camera fired through Mr. Salgado's passenger side window, killing the father of three. Mr. Salgado had no record. He was not subject to a detention order. He was trying to go to work. Now, Mr. Mikowski, you worked for ICE, you trained officers. Is it ever acceptable for ICE agents to pursue a vehicle in an unmarked car without using their lights or sirens? Do you know the rules on that?
Sir, so since I retired, policies may have changed, but I don't believe the policy pursuits were allowed.
Yeah, it's in the ICE field manual. I've got the regulation right here, 8 CFR 287.8, saying that a designated pursuit vehicle is defined only as a vehicle equipped with emergency lights and siren placed in or on the vehicle that emit audible and visual signals. They didn't have that, and now this father of three is dead. 6 days later, Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero, a 26-year-old father, left his home, crossed the country in Biddeford, Maine, to go to work to support his young family. He didn't get far. ICE agents driving an unmarked SUV rammed his vehicle, surrounded his car with guns drawn, and shot him in the head in front of his 3-year-old daughter. And again, they weren't looking for him. They were going to look for somebody else, but they saw him and then chased him down and shot him in front of his daughter. She watched as ICE agents handcuffed her father's lifeless body to the steering wheel. The agent who killed him wasn't wearing a body camera. What's more, he had a history of serious domestic violence, and he'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He once threw boiling water in the face of his ex-wife, his first wife, while she was holding their child. His wife testified that he was a danger to the society, and yet he was armed and deputized by ICE to go out and terrify people. Mr. Del Cueto, you served as a Border Patrol agent for 20 years. Should DHS be doing a background check screen for a history of domestic violence and psychiatric illness?
They do thorough background investigations. If something doesn't get reported, however, that's...
Wait, no, my question is, should they do one?
They do one already.
No, they did not do one in this case. It did not happen. So that did not happen, but it should happen. But it is typical now of ICE's hiring practices. Bring everybody in, just like Donald Trump's pardons. We don't care really what your background is. Clothe you with the power of the federal government, turning our society upside down, turning Americans against each other, and having our officers shoot our people, like Alex Preddy and Renee Good, dead at point-blank range in the streets of America. That's what this has led to. I yield back to you, Mr. Chair.
Do you all, and I'm going to ask the three of you, and if you want to answer, you can too. It's going to be very quick answers because I'm used up a lot of time already. The July 20th attack outside 26 Federal Plaza, does that reflect an increasing threat to federal immigration facilities and the personnel who work there, who I feel sorry for? In other words, these folks are at risk. They're just doing their job. They're the good guys. They're being responsible, trying to do their job, and they're at risk of violent attack, in my opinion. Mr. Murkowski, in a few words.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, 100%. Everybody knows that 26 Federal Plaza houses ICE and other federal agencies, and just an example of what we dealt with every day in New York City.
And we've got people in leadership that fire these people up, that go over there and cause all this havoc and hurt other people in law enforcement. I mean, it's hard to be at any level of law enforcement these days. It's even hard for I spoke to some of the state troopers, and they can't say anything on the record in New Jersey. They were doing a great job. And because the left didn't want them there anymore, they were doing a great job and everybody was working together. ICE was safe, they were safe, the people inside were safe. They were pulled away because they didn't want that, wanted chaos. Mr. Del Cueto.
Yes, sir, absolutely. That and other attacks that have also happened at ICE facilities in the last several months are a direct result of that.
The words we use, the inflammatory rhetoric, God help us. Mr. Arthur, quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I will refer back to the 100-year sentence that was handed out for the mastermind of the attack at the Alvarado Detention Facility in Alvarado, Texas. These are serious crimes. They're a danger. When I served, I was threatened. I could talk about it in a more private setting if you'd like. But yeah, it's a real problem. It's always been a real problem. And
it's getting worse.
Getting worse.
Yep. Mr. Sinha, quickly, just to show I'm fair.
Chairman, look, whenever somebody conducts a violent act, they are held accountable by the criminal legal system. I don't think it has to do with the words being used.
I don't, forgive me, but I don't believe that. I believe politics enters into it. I don't think they're always held liable. It depends where the process takes place. And in some of these blue cities and blue localities, they're not held responsible. And they're made out to be heroes. Violence against law enforcement has become popular, and it's wrong, and I'm tired of it. I think most Americans are too.
Murkowski, you've never worked for a for-profit corporation that runs for-profit detention facilities, have you?
Congressman, thanks for the question.
Have you, yes or no?
No.
And when's the last time you visited Delaney Hall?
When Delaney, before I retired, sir, before it
That
closed
was
in
back
2017.
Yeah, that's been what?
I don't know if you heard me.
Almost 10 years ago. What about you, Mr. Del Cueto? When's the last time you visited Delaney Hall?
Del Cueto, sir.
Del Cueto, I'm sorry.
I have not visited Delaney Hall.
Never in your life?
No, sir, but I have
So you have
been
no
at various
you
different
have no
immigration
personal
facilities that
knowledge.
have detained
You
people.
have no personal knowledge upon which to reasonably conclude that the reports about cruel and inhumane and unusual or not unusual at Trump ICE facilities, you have no personal knowledge upon which you can reasonably conclude that what Mr. Sinha has reported about the conditions at Delaney Hall are true or false. Isn't that correct?
My personal knowledge would be from seeing other immigration detention facilities throughout my career.
You've never been to Delaney Hall, though.
I haven't, but I've been to numerous other immigration
But
detention
what
facilities.
What you saw at your detention facilities, were those public or private, by the way?
They were both.
You've always worked for public.
No, sir, they were both private and public, as well as state-run facilities.
But you don't know what's going on at Delaney Hall. Let me ask Mr. Sinha. Mr. Sinha, can you tell us more about the 50 people who have died in ICE custody since Trump returned to office? And can you opine on the fact that 2026 is already the deadliest year in immigration detention since the Department of Homeland Security was founded?
Thank you for the question, Congressman.
I'll let you answer that question, and then the gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The number of deaths is disproportionate to even the increase of detention in this country. About the number of people detained across the country has increased by 77%, and also the deaths in custody have increased by 300%. So we're talking about a radical increase in the number of people that are being that are killed or dying while detained in immigration detention. That's right.
It's a shame that we are allowing that. Now, Geo Group could have been
Gentleman's
here to
time has
defend
expired.
themselves, but they were not called, and nor were ICE or Customs and Border Patrol, Customs and Border Protection.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Nobody called, just three guys with no personal knowledge.
Because we have sanctuary cities, states, jurisdictions, we let people out onto the streets, some of whom are violent, dangerous felons, get out. We don't cooperate with ICE. Therefore, ICE finds itself in the middle of dangerous situations where the illegal can get hurt, they can get hurt, or just people that are involved can get hurt. That's where the real fault is. If we did everything the right way, which you all are willing to do, we wouldn't have the issue. And quite frankly, that's why so many of the problems are in blue jurisdictions. We should have never let these people out. And I also would say Delaney Hall are not just a bunch of nice people. There may be some in there who aren't felons, but there are absolutely felons, drug dealers, rapists, violent people that are held there. We don't want them outside. And also, by the way, speaking about the conditions there, the Inspector General in New Jersey inspected the facilities, the state facilities in New Jersey, far worse. They have to stand while they eat, crowded conditions, temperatures that go into the 90s. But nobody says anything about them because it's a blue jurisdiction. It just isn't fair. And what's good for one should be good for the other. With that, I have a few UCs that I want to put in for the record from some local media. Delaney Hall menu options. Delaney Hall's menus options better than many Jersey school lunch choices. Fajitas, stir-fry, barbecue chicken. See the food options provided to Delaney Hall. That was NJ.com. This is the New York Post. Inspectors finally got into the kitchen at ICE's Delaney Hall. Here's what they found, and it details the good conditions there. It's also NewJersey.com. The final test, Borders are Tom Holman ate the same meal as the detainees ate, and he did just fine. Delaney Hall snack purchases cast doubt on what was supposed to be a real hunger strike in report.
The chairman's been there. The chairman talked about the false narrative. He's been there and seen it for himself. But the reason the Democrats don't want to talk about anything other than this, some of the things brought up by the ranking members in her opening statement, is because they want to take the message away from what they've done. And I've said this in many hearings. I'll continue to say it. Step one, let in 10 million illegal migrants in the Biden administration. Have no border. Step two, create sanctuary jurisdictions, which makes it difficult to remove those illegal migrants when they commit another crime. And then step three, don't pay the guys, don't fund the guys who do the removing. They shut down the government twice, two longest shutdowns in history, because they didn't want to pay ICE agents, didn't want to pay federal law enforcement to do their job. 18 cities, 11 states, 3 counties, and the District of Columbia are sanctuary jurisdictions. That represents almost a third of the country. where the politicians tell local law enforcement, don't work with federal law enforcement when it comes to enforcing federal law. That is just dumb. I will continue to say that is stupid. Not letting law enforcement work together to protect communities. And we have had witness after witness. One of the most powerful ones I've ever seen was Jessica Gorman 2 weeks ago, who came and talked about what happened to her daughter in Chicago, student at Loyola University, out for a walk and gets attacked and killed by an illegal migrant who'd committed another crime and was out on bail in that sanctuary jurisdiction. So they want to talk about anything else except what's going on. And oh, by the way, these prosecutors like Mr. Krasner, Mr. Descano, Alvin Bragg, all these prosecutors who thought not just those 3 steps, let in 10 million, create sanctuary jurisdictions, don't fund the guys who do the removing. The 4th step is we're going to treat illegal migrants who commit a crime, we're going to treat them better than American citizens who commit the same crime. Because they all have policies that say we will take into account the immigration status, deportation status of the migrant who committed a crime when we determine what kind of charges we're going to bring and what kind of plea agreement we're going to have. That is ridiculous as well. That is stupid as well, and frankly, I think unconstitutional. So that's why we have these hearings, to highlight and underscore how ridiculous it is in now what represents almost a third of the country in these sanctuary jurisdictions. We have passed legislation out of this committee. I hope sometime soon the bill passes the House, moves to the Senate, and actually becomes law, because a third of the country would be much better off if we got rid of this concept. And with that,
We're talking about exactly what the majority wants us to talk about, because they control the agenda. They've called this hearing, and we've been responding to them. The ambiguous title of today's hearing, False Narratives Surrounding Conditions at the Delaney Hall ICE Detention Center, naturally invites the question of whether the majority is seeking to debunk false narratives or entrench false narratives. One clue is that the title does not refer to facts at all. Another is that the majority has neither organized a committee visit to Delaney Hall, which we easily could have done, nor even undertaken the basic step of inviting an actual administration witness from ICE or the Department of Homeland Security to be with us here today to answer questions from members of Congress. That doesn't sound much like an intensive fact-based investigation to me. ICE and Homeland Security have been concocting false narratives to mask the inhumane conditions at Delaney Hall and other ICE detention facilities since Stephen Miller and Donald Trump launched their 2,000 arrests a day quota onslaught against American communities and immigrants. An entire ecosystem of lies and corruption now governs at ICE and DHS, where hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars were spent by Kristi Noem on lavish private jets complete with bedrooms and wet bars, and narcissistic public relations campaigns where no-bid government contracts are passed out to mega donors like Mar-a-Lago party gift bags, and where obscene corruption is stacked on top of obscene cruelty. DHS officials routinely lie to federal judges about institutional conditions and practices. They and their lawyers have been caught over 800 times brazenly defying court orders and lying to federal judges and magistrates. They are routinely excoriated in court for their lawlessness and their betrayal of the legal profession, but with no apparent effect on their behavior. American citizens like the people in this room have been held illegally for weeks by ICE. American citizens have been beaten, bloodied, and killed simply for exercising their First Amendment and their Second Amendment rights in a way disfavored by the masked paramilitary forces of ICE. The good chairman says, hey, if you don't like the wonderful accommodations at Delaney Hall offered by the Department of Homeland Security, you can just self-deport whenever you want. Actually, it's not true. Check out a federal district court decision handed down yesterday, Mr. Chairman, on July 21st in the United States District Court of the District of New Jersey, Marlon Andres Torres Gomez versus Luis Soto, Warden Delaney Hall. Well, this is a case where a detainee of the deluxe accommodations got an agreement to get out on May 12th, May 12th, while he was in custody, and an immigration judge ordered that his self-deportation be allowed. And then it was set for June the 10th. And guess what? He had a plane ticket, he had an agreement with ICE, he had an agreement with Delaney Hall, and then they blocked him from leaving the country at the airport. Brought him back and said he was now in the custody of ICE all over again. Now, this district court opinion strikes that down and says it's an absolute violation of habeas corpus in the agreement that ICE made. So, even if you assume that Delaney Hall has the kind of accommodations that Ghislaine Maxwell has down at the prison camp she was switched to by Todd Blanche when he liked what she had to say about Donald Trump's involvement with the Epstein files, and then suddenly she got the deluxe Trump Hotel treatment, including use of a therapy puppy, room service in her cell, and so on. Even if you assume that's going on with everybody at Delaney Hall, you can't get out. At least maybe they'll change their tune now with this court decision, but we've heard about other cases like this. And, you know, one of the officers suggested to me that the reason why there are really bad conditions at some of these facilities is because Stephen Miller and Donald Trump want people to leave. They don't want them to have their day before an administrative judge, and they want to make it as miserable as possible for people, so they self-deport. And so I leave it to the judgment of members of the committee whether that's the way that America should be treating people in this situation. Nonetheless, Delaney Hall is a detention facility owned and operated by Geo Group, a private for-profit prison contractor that has a $1 billion government contract to operate this facility for people being held on civil immigration charges. Roughly 90% of the 891 people detained at Delaney Hall in April had no criminal record. By DHS's own accounting, 90% had no criminal record. Of the 1 in 10 detainees who did have a criminal record, the most common offenses were traffic violations. In May of this year, 300 detainees launched a hunger and labor strike. They described being treated like animals. They and their lawyers reported meals of rotten meat, expired meals, meals with worms in them. Senator Andy Kim, our former House colleague, who conducted unannounced oversight visits of the facility, reported seeing milk so spoiled it had curdled completely. Detainees say the water is foul-tasting and undrinkable. People were forced to sleep on floors due to overcrowding, and as billions of dollars of taxpayer money are pocketed by corporations in lavish inside contracts, detainees experience poor ventilation, extreme cold in winter, scalding showers, physical abuse by guards, and a shortage of basic necessities. The medical conditions of detainees are alarming. Rita Lynn Harris, a detainee with glaucoma, anemia, high blood pressure, and circulation problems, was denied her medications because facility officials called her care cosmetic. Senator Kim met with a pregnant detainee who was not receiving appropriate OBGYN care. Another woman received no medical attention after she'd had a miscarriage. Delaney Hall is not an isolated case. Across the country, the bureaucratic indifference of ICE and extravagant profiteering of its corporate partners create ghastly conditions in many cases. In a New Mexico center, a detainee experiencing unbearable dental pain that had been left untreated for months despite repeated requests to see a dentist, Mr. Chairman, pulled out his own tooth. In Texas, the converging indifference of Kristi Noem and the sadistic incompetence of RFK Jr. produced an epidemic outbreak of measles at Camp East Montana, ICE's largest detention center in the state, which then contributed to the measles pandemic already raging in Texas. According to the Associated Press, detainees report that even the most basic care is denied there: a gauze bandage to protect an open foot wound, prenatal care for a high-risk pregnancy, a pillow to ease the pain of sleeping with advanced stomach cancer, sanitary pads for postpartum bleeding. All of these are complaints that have been filed with the facility. Since the administration took office, more than 50 people have died in ICE custody. More have died in custody in 2025 than in any year in the last 2 decades. The rate of death in ICE custody is spiking because the conditions are simply worse than they've ever been before. ICE and DHS traffic in lawless violence, propaganda, and disinformation to mask all the corruption and cruelty which are the daily bread of the system. In Minneapolis, ICE and Border Patrol agents shot dead Renee Good and Alex Preddy in broad daylight at point-blank range, and then defamed both of these innocent Americans, one a mother of three, another a VA nurse, by labeling them domestic terrorists. The new regime at DHS under Secretary Mullen, well, the jury is still out, but we haven't seen much change yet. Just weeks ago in Texas, an ICE officer killed Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, a construction worker who had lived and worked in America without any incident. No criminal convictions or charges for 35 years. Federal law enforcement tried to justify the killing by saying officers found suspicious substances in his car. The suspicious substance turned out to be salt. In Maine, just a week later, an ICE officer with a history of psychological issues and domestic violence, he threw his 13-year-old daughter through a glass table, fatally shot 26-year-old Johann Sebastian Guerrero, the father of a 3-year-old girl whom he treated like a princess, according to her mother. At what point do we say enough is enough? The government isn't targeting the worst of the worst, it's behaving like the worst of the worst. DHS agents are arresting kindergartners, daycare teachers, and parents dropping off children at school. Roving gangs of officials are abducting children from their beds in the middle of the night or using them as bait in order to catch and arrest their frantic parents. DHS is rounding up workers with lawful status working at small businesses as roofers, plumbers, landscapers, farmhands, and nurses. They're arresting refugees who went through stringent vetting to come here and targeting immigrants who are following the law by showing up at their court hearings and ICE check-ins. At what point will we finally say, enough to this? This is not America. So, my friends, I'm happy to hear about what's happening in Delaney Hall. I should think we should do investigations about all of the detention centers across the country where people are complaining. But this is a nation that's built on immigration, except for the descendants of people who were brought here, kidnapped, abducted, and turned into slaves. And except for the Native Americans, all of us are descendants of immigrants. And the vast majority of people being held in these facilities are not criminals of any variety, and we should get back to the rule of law in America and remember the Statue of Liberty, and remember what Tom Paine said when he got here in 1774. He said, if this nation lives up to its values and ideals, it will become an asylum to humanity. Not an insane asylum, but a place of refuge for people seeking freedom from religious and intellectual and political repression from all over the world. Let's get back to the America that still lives in our hearts. I yield back to you.
We're here today because of a narrative that has been told over and over and over again for weeks. The narrative is that Delaney Hall, and by extension, all of these detention centers, are places of cruelty. It's just not true. That the people working there are starving, the detainees are hurting, they are being denied medical care, and they're being abused. I want to be very direct about this story. It's false. It's not true. It's not accurate. And the people telling it know it's false. They have seen the same things that I have seen. I can tell you because I've seen them with my own eyes. I walked the facility. I met with the staff, not just the routine zipping out. We were there a long time. And what I saw goes against all the narratives that you hear and that the Democrats have tried to say about this facility. Detainees there are served 3 meals a day and are evaluated by certified dietitians. I'm just going to go through the list. They have access to medical, dental, and mental health care, and if it's something more they can deal with, they have cooperative agreements with local hospitals. They get 24-hour emergency care whenever and wherever it's needed. And, you know, I'm a dentist, so I got a chance to talk to the dentist. The physician. The dentist I did not get a chance to speak with. Just as an aside, you know, there's this sense that, oh, they're not getting good medical care. He went into, and he can't show me private files, obviously, that's, you know, classified information between a physician and his patient. but told me about the people who had diabetes and never knew it, told me about individuals who had never been to a doctor before in their life and finally receiving medical care, people with high blood pressure, people with a variety of issues and illnesses that were receiving medications and prescriptions for them for the first time ever in their life. The Department of Homeland Security has said plainly that ICE holds these facilities to higher standards than most American prisons, and that's what I saw. And I have to tell you, again, in my former life as a state senator, I was chairman of the Prison Gang Task Force, went into every facility in the state of New Jersey, every one of them, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And let me tell you, they wish that those facilities look like this facility does, because this facility was far nicer. I originally went hoping it was as good as that, at least. It is far better. When members of this very body toured the facility, one of our Democratic colleagues, she doesn't want to say it now, but when they were in there, looked and said, in her words, it's a quote, "Gee, things aren't bad." And that's all I'll say. State health inspectors went into the kitchen and found the sanitation and physical conditions satisfactory, free of any sign of vermin. This is the state of New Jersey, state health inspectors, very blue state, very Democratic state, sent their health inspectors in from the governor's office, and they said everything was good. That's not what they had to say about New Jersey prisons, by the way. Despite all of it, weeks of false claims being made by Democrats have drawn crowds to Delaney Hall. Crowds have thrown projectiles, they had set fires, they had blocked law enforcement vehicles, they blocked an ambulance, officers have been assaulted, more than 80 people had to be arrested. This is what false narratives produce, not only here, but in general. Chaos outside, danger for men and women who are really doing their job. They're simply doing what has been asked of them, and they are local folks from the city of Newark. It endangers the workers of the facility, most of whom, as I said, are Newark residents. So when the mayor of Newark and the governor of New Jersey pulls away the police or sparks anger among protesters, they endanger their own citizens. Again, where there is cooperation in many ways among county, state, local, and federal officials, we have very few problems anywhere in the country. It's where that cooperation doesn't exist that we have problems. ICE is not supposed to be doing crowd control. They should have help. They could have help. It's wrong that they don't get the help that they need. Democrats, on the other hand, continue to choose the side of illegal immigrants over the American people. Only a few weeks ago, they convened a field hearing to give voice to illegal criminal immigrants in detention at Newark. And I would ask them, when's the last time they convened a hearing for all of the American families across this great country who were victims? The mothers, the fathers, the children who lost a loved one to a crime committed by somebody who was in this country illegally. When was the last time Democrats offered those families a hearing room? The people detained at Delaney Hall are not all random innocents. And, you know, let me say this. I mean, for those of us that have sat here through hearings and you've seen children that will never be okay, and you've seen parents and families that will never be okay because their child was beaten, was raped, was murdered. There are no words for that. We just got to make sure it doesn't happen, and it's wrong. We knowingly and purposely, not we, but others, let these individuals into our country, and they shouldn't have. And they should be detained. And by the way, if it's so bad at Delaney Hall, just so you know, everybody has the option to self-deport. They will be helped if they want to self-deport. They want to leave, it's not good, they don't like the food, they don't like the housing, they don't like the recreation. I didn't even go into, by the way, the soccer fields. I didn't go into the gym that is better than, and I try to hit the gym every day, and I've been in a few nice gyms for many, many years, and this was up to any of them, anywhere. that I've seen. So why the false narratives? Why would anybody do this? I know it's false. I've seen it with my own eyes. The people who are saying the false narratives know the truth, but they keep pushing the big lie. And all it does is create chaos. It fuels hostility towards law enforcement officers. It creates crime. It creates problem. It separates the country. It divides the nation. None of it is good. It should stop. We just want to keep our communities safe. We don't want more kids to die. We don't want more brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, grandmothers, families to be hurt. And by the way, there's the hunger strike. Oh, the food's so bad, they're making us eat maggots. Look at the food. They've got halal for those that are Islamic food. They've got kosher food. They've got, if you have different diseases or illnesses or health issues, they've got restricted diets. Anybody in a restricted diet, low salt diet, et cetera, can get what they need there. But there was the hunger strike. We're not eating. We're on a hunger strike. We're going to sacrifice. We're not going to eat. What did we find out? I don't know if you all know. No, they were eating. They were given money by outside forces. They were going to the commissary and they were getting their potato chips and Twinkies and, you name whatever else. And maybe it's New Jersey, so they were getting some good New Jersey pizza. I don't know. But they were getting plenty of food. And in fact, during that time of the supposed hunger strikes, the population went down 13% in Delaney Hall. But the food intake at the commissary tripled. They were eating good and they were eating a lot. So nobody's a victim here. Nobody's a self-sacrificial person. I don't know if they were eating healthy food. They would have been better off eating the food they were supposed to because it was pretty damn healthy. It was a balanced diet. By the way, everybody who's got a registered dietitian telling them what they should eat every day, raise your hand. They do. Just so you know.
Let's break down a House Judiciary subcommittee hearing about a single immigration detention center, Delaney Hall in New Jersey. The hearing's official title called the reports of bad conditions there, false narratives, and that title tells you the fight was on before anyone spoke. Underneath it were two arguments, one about whether this specific facility treats people humanely, and a much bigger one about immigration enforcement itself. We'll keep this measured because it's exactly the kind of topic where heat replaces light. Here's the frame. Republicans, led by Subcommittee Chairman Jeff Van Drew, argued the abuse reports are false and that the facility is safe and well run. Democrats, led by Ranking Member Jamie Raskin, argued conditions are poor and that the hearing was staged to look away from real problems. A fair check treats both as testable claims because some of what each side said can be checked against records and some of it is contested. So set the two lenses side by side. The conditions lens asks whether people inside Delaney Hall are being treated humanely and lawfully. The enforcement lens asks the bigger question the hearing kept circling, how the country should detain and remove people, and how to keep everyone, detainees and officers alike, safe. This breakdown checks each against the record, not the outrage. One ground rule, and it matters more here than usual. This subject is painful and politically charged, so we'll keep it factual, calm, and fair to both sides. We're not here to tell you immigration enforcement is cruel or heroic. We're checking what's verifiable, what inspectors found, what the witnesses claimed, what the numbers show, and where honest people still disagree. The goal is clarity, not a verdict on immigration itself. Start with the things almost everyone in the room actually agreed on. Both sides said they want two things at once, a country that enforces its immigration laws and detention that is humane and follows the rules. No one argued for mistreating detainees, and no one argued for no enforcement at all. Republicans emphasized order and officer safety. Democrats emphasized dignity and due process. The disagreement is about balance and about facts on the ground, not about whether either value matters. And both sides agreed the system is under enormous strain. Detention numbers have risen sharply, facilities are crowded, and staff are stretched. That's not a partisan claim, it's the backdrop to every specific fight that followed. When a system expands quickly, two things tend to happen at once, more enforcement and more mistakes. Holding both of those in mind is the only honest way to read this hearing. Now the first fight. What conditions inside Delaney Hall are actually like? Chairman Van Drew made a specific, checkable case. He said he toured the facility himself and found 3 meals a day prepared with dietitians, access to medical, dental, and mental health care, and around-the-clock emergency services. He added that New Jersey state health inspectors reviewed the kitchen and found it satisfactory and free of vermin. Those are concrete claims tied to official inspections, which is the strongest kind of evidence a defender can offer. Ranking Member Raskin told a very different story, also with specifics. He described a large hunger strike, complaints of spoiled food and crowded conditions, and he stressed that no independent committee visit was organized and no official from the detention agency was invited to testify. His point was pointed but fair on process. It's hard to call a narrative false while declining to hear from the people who run the facility. That procedural gap is real. So how do you weigh a favorable inspection against detainee complaints? Carefully, because both can be true. A kitchen can pass inspection on the day it's checked and still serve food detainees find inadequate on other days. A facility can meet a legal minimum standard and still be a hard place to be held. The honest read is that Van Drew's inspection points are real, and they don't automatically disprove the complaints Raskin raised. They're answering slightly different questions. There was also a sharp credibility exchange worth naming neutrally. Congressman Hank Johnson questioned how much first-hand knowledge the majority's witnesses actually had, establishing that one had not visited the facility recently and another had not visited it at all. Whatever your politics, that's a legitimate line of questioning. Expertise about a specific place is stronger when you've actually been there. It doesn't make the witnesses wrong, but it does bear on how much weight their descriptions carry. Now a factual dispute at the center of it: who was actually held inside. Here the two sides described almost opposite populations. Van Drew said the facility holds serious offenders, people with felony records and dangerous histories. Raskin countered that, by one accounting, roughly 90% of the detainees taken in during one recent month had no criminal record at all. Both can be partly right, because a single facility holds a mix, and the numbers shift month to month as enforcement priorities change. And here's the crucial distinction that gets lost in the shouting. Being held in immigration detention is not the same as being convicted of a crime. Immigration violations are largely civil matters, so a person with no criminal record can still be lawfully detained for a status issue. That cuts against the idea that everyone inside is a hardened criminal, and also against the idea that detention itself proves wrongdoing. Detention is about immigration status, first and foremost, not guilt. Now the bigger fight the hearing kept expanding into: enforcement itself. Chairman Jim Jordan pressed the majority's core argument that so-called sanctuary policies, where local jurisdictions limit cooperation with federal immigration authorities, make removals harder and, in his telling, let dangerous people back onto the street. He and the witnesses framed those policies as reckless. That's a real and widely held position, and there are documented cases where a person released under such a policy later committed a serious offense. But the honest counterweight matters too. Many law enforcement leaders support limited cooperation policies for a practical reason. They argue that when immigrants fear that any police contact means deportation, victims and witnesses stop reporting crimes, which makes everyone less safe. So sanctuary policy isn't simply pro or anti-public safety. Serious people on both sides claim the safety mantle, using different evidence. The debate is real, not settled. Van Drew raised a concern that deserves to be taken seriously on its own terms: the safety of immigration officers. He pointed to a rise in threats and to an attack on federal personnel, arguing that inflammatory rhetoric has made their jobs dangerous. Regardless of where you stand on immigration, threatening or attacking law enforcement is indefensible, and it's fair to insist that the debate stay heated in words and never in violence. Raskin pressed the opposite edge. The rule of law is a limit on the government, not just a tool for it. He cited a federal court decision finding that an approved departure was improperly blocked, and pointed to a broader pattern of alleged defiance of court orders. His argument is that enforcement without regard for due process stops being law enforcement and becomes something else. That, too, is a serious constitutional concern, not a talking point. Now the numbers, because both sides threw big ones, and they need context. The minority witness from a civil liberties group testified that the number of deaths in immigration custody has risen sharply, citing an increase he put at around 300%, while the detained population rose by a smaller share. That gap, if accurate, is genuinely alarming, because it suggests the rate of deaths went up, not just the raw count. It's the single most serious factual claim in the hearing, and it deserves scrutiny rather than reflex. But handle even that carefully, in both directions. Small base numbers can produce huge percentage swings, so a jump stated as 300% can reflect a move from a few cases to somewhat more. which is still serious but not the same as a mass event. At the same time, a defender pointing to a passing inspection can't wave the deaths away. The mature position is that any death in government custody demands investigation, and the percentages are a reason to look, not a conclusion. And step back, because the hearing itself was part of the fight. Notice the structure. The majority titled the hearing around the idea that the bad reports are false, and chose witnesses who largely support that view. The minority pointed out that no official who runs the facility was called to testify, and no bipartisan site visit was arranged before passing judgment. That's a fair criticism of process, and it would be just as fair if the parties were reversed. A hearing designed to reach one conclusion is weaker evidence than one designed to find out. A word on the witnesses, because who's in the chair shapes what you hear. The majority called experienced voices who lean one way. A retired senior immigration official, an advocate from a group that favors tighter immigration limits, and a former immigration judge from a restriction-minded research center. The minority called a civil liberties director who leans the other way. That's normal for a hearing, but it's worth knowing. This was a panel of advocates making arguments, not a panel of neutral inspectors reporting findings. Weigh the testimony accordingly. That's exactly why first-hand knowledge became such a live issue. When your witnesses are chosen partly for their point of view, the natural check is to ask what they've actually seen. So when it came out that some had little or no recent direct contact with this specific facility, it didn't prove them wrong, but it did move their testimony from eyewitness account toward informed opinion. That distinction is the difference between evidence and argument. Now, briefly, how immigration detention actually works, because most people aren't sure. Here are the neutral basics. Immigration detention is civil, not criminal, and it's meant to hold people while their cases or removals are processed. Many facilities, including this one, are run by private companies under federal contract, and they're supposed to meet national detention standards and pass inspections. That structure is the backdrop to the whole fight. Supporters point to the standards and inspections. Critics point to the gap between the standards on paper and life inside. And Delaney Hall in particular carries history. It reopened as a detention center in 2025 and quickly became a flashpoint, drawing protests and high-profile confrontations that made national news well before this hearing. That backstory is part of why the language is so charged. By the time these members sat down, the facility was already a symbol to both sides. A symbol is harder to see clearly than a building. One concrete tension captured the whole thing. The chairman noted that people in detention can choose to depart the country voluntarily rather than stay held, presenting that as a humane off-ramp. The ranking member countered with a court case in which an approved voluntary departure was, he said, improperly blocked. If both are accurate, the lesson is that an off-ramp only counts if it actually works in practice, and the courts, not the podium, will decide whether it did. And keep the human stakes in plain view on every side. This isn't abstract for anyone involved. For a detained person, the difference between a decent facility and a bad one is measured in real suffering, and time held is time away from family and work. For an officer, the job now carries genuine risk and a rise in threats. For a community, both unaddressed crime and eroded trust have costs. A serious account holds all three of those in view at once, instead of erasing whichever one is politically inconvenient. Which brings us to Congress's actual job here, which is oversight. Oversight means finding out what's true and fixing what's broken, using the subpoena power in the site visit and the sworn testimony of the people in charge. A hearing can do that, or it can perform certainty for the cameras. This one leaned toward performance on both sides. The tools to actually settle the facts existed in that room and largely went unused. And a steadying thought against the noise. Almost every disputed claim here is knowable. Whether the food is adequate, who is detained, what the death rate is, whether departures are being honored, these are facts that an independent inspection and honest data could establish. The reason we're left arguing is not that the truth is unreachable. It's that reaching for it is less useful politically than the fight. That's a choice, and it can change. Before we close, let's give each side its strongest, fairest case. Give the enforcement side its due. A country has both the right and the responsibility to control its borders and to detain people who are subject to removal. And the officers who carry out that job deserve to be safe. Pointing to real cases where gaps in the system led to harm isn't fear-mongering. It's an argument that the rules should be enforced consistently. And an inspection that passed is real evidence, not spin. Now give the other side its due. People in government custody, whatever their status, are owed humane treatment and due process, because that's what separates a lawful system from an arbitrary one. Insisting on independent inspections, court oversight, and hearing from the agency in charge isn't obstruction, it's how a free country keeps its own power honest. And the person with no criminal record, detained and afraid, is exactly who those protections exist for. And notice the common ground hiding under the anger. Almost no one actually opposes both enforcement and humane treatment. Most people want both, in some proportion. Both sides claim to want safe officers and lawful, decent conditions. The real fight is over facts. How bad conditions are, who's detained, what the numbers mean, and those are answerable with independent inspection and transparency, if anyone will allow it. So let's total it up honestly across the whole hearing. Here's the fair scorecard. Bandrew's inspection and tour points are real and shouldn't be dismissed. Raskin's process criticism, no agency witness, and no site visit is also real and shouldn't be dismissed. The detained population is genuinely mixed, not all offenders and not all innocents. The deaths in custody claim is serious and unresolved, and the deepest questions about enforcement were argued, not answered in that room. So where does it leave us? With a hearing that told you more about our politics than about Delaney Hall. Both sides walked in with a conclusion and found the facts that fit it. The honest path is dull by comparison, an independent inspection, transparent numbers, testimony from the people who run the place, and a willingness to be surprised. Until then, treat both the word false and the word abuse as claims, not proof. Watch three things from here. First, whether any independent bipartisan inspection of the facility actually happens, or whether both sides stay content with dueling anecdotes. Second, whether the deaths in custody numbers get a transparent official accounting. And third, whether the courts, not the hearing room, end up defining the limits of enforcement. Those outcomes, not the sound bites, are where this is really decided. Because a country's character shows in how it treats the people it holds, and in how honestly it argues about it. This hearing was long on certainty and short on curiosity, from both sides. The facts are knowable if anyone wants to know them. That's the work, and it happens long after the cameras leave. That's where we'll keep watching. That is our breakdown. Stay with us.